The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are live on Twitch. For the first time, we are doing a live episode of Music Mondays on the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us, and going to be a different type of Music Monday today, as we are obviously first off recording this on Sunday, as we usually do, but this is going to be our typical Monday show with a little bit of a twist. We're going to bring you a little bit of news each and every week. We are going to be able to play clips of the songs that we are picking each and every week, which I think will add to basically how this is going to go. So really excited to see how this is going to be formatted as we go forward. So certainly a new experience. If you're watching on Twitch, you're watching on YouTube, you should get to hear the music clips. If you're listening to this on our podcast hosting sites, which we'll continue to be able to do, they will not have the audio clips in there. It will just be our normal podcast, just basically like you normally get it. Joining me in studio, as always, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It is going. We are slowly ever evolving, so this should be an interesting experiment to see how we can pivot to Twitch and YouTube a little more meaningfully.
Yeah, try to do something that's going to be a little more live, and hopefully something that our listeners are going to be able to interact with us. And of course, you can interact with us on Twitch. We'll do our best to try to keep up with any messages and answer any questions that we get during these live programs. We're going to get to our music picks each week, or this week, I should say, as we do each and every week. Chris, unfortunately, not able to join us this week. He'll be back with us next week. We do have his picks. We'll be able to at least play some clips from his picks for this week when we get to those. We're going to start with a news item that you brought to our attention this week in the Discord from the website metalsucks.net. And it was a reader poll that they conduct each and every week asking which nu metal band was the worst. I guess first off, your thoughts on nu metal in general, because I know it is almost a swear word amongst metal fans. When you start talking about nu metal, it becomes something that doesn't really bring a lot of joy to the hearts and minds of metal fans.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't know if there's just some really weird nostalgia for it now, but if you look on YouTube and also with the stories that Google seems to feed me, it's becoming an increasingly hot topic. People are talking about it. The Punk Rock MBA is constantly doing videos on it, which people are watching, so he's going to continue doing it. I don't know if that's kind of the new area where people kind of longing for the old days. That's now the old days, that early 2000s rock and metal scene. People are talking about, like this article mentioned, Slipknot going back to their old gear and Powerman 5000 creating new music again, which I'm actually kind of excited about. It does kind of seem like that's where we are, and kind of like people who maybe didn't like grunge back in the 90s, give it 10, 15 years, you kind of look at it a little more fondly. In a way, you kind of feel the same about nu metal, where you didn't dig it at the time, but you kind of see a little bit of the merit to certain bands that maybe you didn't originally. So yeah, here we are talking about the poll that was thrown up here on metalsucks.net asking which nu metal band was the worst.
And what's interesting is you go through the names of some of these bands, and there are some on this list that I have some fond memories of. Starting right near the top, I know Edema is a band that certainly had some hits. Alien Ant Farm really only had a couple of hits, but they were certainly catchy. One that really stuck out in the early part of the list to me was Dead Z.
Yeah.
Because I can understand why there would be some people that maybe weren't a huge fan of Dead Z, but Key to Gramercy Park was a great one. And you mentioned another song of theirs today in the Discord that was a banger, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, I really always thought She Likes Big Words was super catchy. The synth and keyboard in that song, just very 80s with kind of that orgy-esque, like, down-tuned metal sound. To me, they kind of felt like a weird combination of 80s synth rock and orgy, which may or may not be a good thing, but their stuff was catchy.
Yeah, no question about it. And again, a lot of other really good bands on this list. Disturbed obviously had a ton of hits. Godsmack, Evanescence, Kid Rock. Say what you will for Kid Rock, he had a ton of hits, no question.
Longevity. The guy has been around as long as anyone on this list.
No question. Korn, obviously. I know Chris, I think, was a big fan of Korn. So
I think there are some bands on this list that, whether you like nu metal or not, you can objectively say they were good at it. And to me, if you did like a top 5 of the new metal bands of all time, Korn's number 1.
Yeah.
To me, they best exemplify what that sound was without ever feeling like, well, that's just hard rock. Like, no, they were right there. Like, they were what I perceive to be new metal.
I think because they took chances. They were definitely outside the box. They weren't just a straight evolution of what hard rock was in the 90s. They went outside the box and kind of created their own thing. Limp Bizkit, obviously, again, we joke about Limp Bizkit all the time, but they had some big hits as well. Linkin Park obviously was huge. Machine Head, certainly another very solid band.
They're an interesting one because they were one of those bands, and you can make a list of a lot of bands that did this, that in kind of the late 90s and early 2000s kind of pivoted toward the new metal sound and look. You can look up one of their videos from around that era, and it's almost laughable to think that these guys that were like thrash and groove metal throughout the 90s now look like a new metal band. And clearly that didn't last, because not long after, maybe a few albums later, they went back to kind of being more traditional thrash metal, which is what you kind of know them as now. But yeah, like a lot of different acts kind of flirted with the new metal sound. To me, possibly the worst ever is on this list, and that's Methods of Mayhem, which was the Tommy Lee side project, which, man, that was a thing. But you try to jump on the sound that's hot. You look at artists like Alice Cooper and Ozzy. They've been doing that for years, where they would reinvent themselves into what was in vogue at the time. And depending on who you are, sometimes they let you get away with that kind of selling out, and sometimes they don't. Yeah.
Is there any other? I was getting around to maybe some of the lesser bands on the list. There's still some other good ones on there. Obviously, Mudvayne, Papa Roach, Powerman 5000, you've already mentioned. Saliva, Seven Dust, Slipknot, again, you mentioned them. Stained had only a couple of hits, but they were kind of like, eh. And System of a Down, Static X, but you mentioned Methods of Mayhem, obviously, notoriously bad. Any other ones on this list that really jump out at you? Because there's a difference between someone being bad like that and being bad like Limp Bizkit. Like, Limp Bizkit was not great, but they had a ton of hits.
Yeah, I mean, there are some bands on here, honestly, that I'm not even familiar with, that were around at that point in time, but I never listened to them. But like I said, Methods of Mayhem is definitely top as far as what I would not enjoy. One that if Chris were here, we might have a deeper conversation about is the band Crazy Town. I was never a fan of theirs. For years I've been told that the rest of that album that they got big with doesn't sound like Butterfly, but ultimately that doesn't matter because that's the song I think of. On the other hand, some of the bands that maybe didn't last beyond that era or weren't really notable after that era that I thought were good. You mentioned Edema. They kind of have this in some of their songs, like this cross between nu metal and almost like a boy band sound, but it worked. Cold Chamber was classic. Dead Z, Dope was really good. There are definitely some diamonds in here, but as far as the bottom tier, I would definitely go Methods of Mayhem, Crazy Town. And one that I mentioned in our Discord that isn't on the list, but actually really did happen, was when I mentioned artists who kind of tried to flirt with the nu metal sound to varying levels of success. Vanilla Ice released a nu metal album where he actually had like a nu metal version of Ice Ice Baby. You have to look it up and listen to it. I don't know if I can adequately describe it.
So the difference situation for us recording this live, we do have a little bit of interaction in the chat. First off, hi to Heather for listening in. Chris sent her our way, so big thanks to joining us for this podcast. Sorry Chris wasn't able to make it today, but I know he's chatting in here. He did mention Crazy Town's The Gift of Game is a guilty pleasure of his, so that may be a future episode.
That is a gift to no one.
It is not a gift from God. That's right.
It's an unholy curse from the beast we call the Desolate One. First of the fallen.
There's going to be so many
spoiler aversions. The master of abortions.
It's funny, we just talked King Diamond last week, but
there's never a bad time for Clerks 2.
If not, we're going to be referencing all those sorts of things. Chris is a slacker. We got it in the chat. Chris is being a good husband and father on Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there as well. Certainly, Chris taking care of what he needs to take care of today. He'll be back with us soon, and we've got a lot of exciting stuff coming up on this podcast. And certainly let us know or go on the website. In fact, I will, since I can do that now, I will post a link to that poll in our chat, and maybe, possibly, let's try that again. When I said in the YouTube page that or the Facebook page that there could be some scuff, there could be some scuff. I don't know why that's not pasting. There we go. Feel free to take that poll, and we'll let you know what the results end up being on that website. And
even more so, if there's a band listed there that you think maybe doesn't deserve to be among the worst, let us know. Maybe there's something we're missing.
Absolutely, because that's so often the case when we do this Music Mondays is we're judging these bands based on a very small sample size, and sometimes that's not representative of how good these bands are. So certainly interesting, to say the least. But we will talk more about nu metal, I'm sure, in the days and weeks to come. But we're going to get to the meat of what we do here on the Nerdcast Empire, and that is Music Monday, when we each pick two different bands that have releases. These are the releases as of April the 26th. So Mike has put the list together. And Mike, I guess if you want to, at some point while we're talking and listening to music, if you'd like to get a link to the playlist and put it in the chat, we can have that in the chat as well. That way you could check that out. And normally we put that in a YouTube video, but we can put it right here in the chat if you want to check out the entire list of music that Mike has pulled from April the 26th. He usually pulls a track off of each of the albums, puts them in the playlist. We go through them, and then we each pick two bands that we like. And normally I let Mike go first. He is busy at the moment coming up with that list. So we're going to go ahead and play Chris's picks because he's not here to defend himself. So we're going to go ahead and put those in there. But two really solid picks again from Chris this week. The first band he has picked is Distorta with the EP A Devil in the Dust. And I have a clip from that, and we are going to play that at this time. So let us hear a little bit of Distorta and A Devil in the Dust. This is from the song The Tomorrow People. We'll get a chance to listen to that, so let's do that. That is from Distorta. The Tomorrow People is the name of the song from the EP A Devil in the Dust. Certainly check that out. Definitely a little bit different sound from this, but it's got a good sound. Music sounds great. The singing is certainly unique, which I think certainly makes it stand out, and so definitely check that out. Definitely a comment from Heather sounded a little bit like Arch Enemy, so I can definitely see that comparison as well. So check that out. That's Chris's first pick of the week. His other pick is from the band Thalia with the album The River of Books. And we're going to actually play a little bit from the title track, which is The River of Books, if I make sure I push up the right fader to make sure that we get to hear that on the air. So let's check out a little bit of The River of Books from the album The River of Books. That's The River of Books on the album with the same name from Thalia. It's got a good sound. I really would like to hear a little bit more of that album. Didn't get a chance to listen to as much of that one, but Really enjoy that. So those are Chris's 2 picks, and if he jumps back into the chat a little later, I'm sure he'll talk a little bit more about those 2 artists. But we're going to move on to Mike. Mike always gets to go first, and now that he's posted that link in there for anybody who wants to check those out, we'll go ahead and let Mike go through his 2 picks. So, Mike, what have you got first for us this week?
Well, first off, kind of going back to Chris's picks, those were 2 that I wasn't too far off from picking myself. Distorta, I think the breakdown in vocals was pretty good. I would have preferred to hear a little more clean, but in some of the songs you do kind of get that kind of gang, a little more melodic vocal chorus, which I really liked. And the music has this really nice blend of both kind of a modern metal sound with traditional, so I definitely think they're cool and something I'd like to check out more of. As far as Thalia goes, the MVD shop where you can buy their album, it looks like, kind of points out that they're a band for fans of Rush, King's X, Dream Theater, Living Colour, and I can definitely hear that. It has this nice blend of prog with still kind of like an odd like throwback sound to it. It feels a little more like older prog at times, but was really close to choosing them. I thought they were really good.
Yeah, like I said, I think they're 2 really solid picks, very different picks, but I definitely see the Thalia comparisons very, very much so. Feels very much like those bands, and it's why it's definitely one I would definitely like check some more out on. But now getting to your picks,
yes,
specifically now that we've talked about Chris's picks.
Now to my picks. For my first pick this week, I am going with a band from Budapest, Hungary, who originated in 2003, actually came back in 2020 after a hiatus with an EP, and this is their first full-length album since that hiatus. They are the Idoru with the album Undertow.
Do they know anything about the Puppet Master?
I have to think that they were around King Diamond when he told that story, at least I would hope.
It all comes back to King Diamond, but tell us about the Idoru.
Yeah, labeled as a post-hardcore / punk rock band on Wikipedia. I can definitely hear that. The singer, Andris Bodex, I think, has vocals that are stronger than most of your typical post-hardcore bands. Music's really heavy, but really catchy at the same time. I think kind of labeling them as one thing, whether it be post-hardcore or punk rock, just kind of does them a disservice, because I think they kind of hit multiple areas of hard rock. You can kind of hear some like melodic metal in their music, some normal hard rock, emo, punk, post-hardcore. Like, I feel like they go in a lot of different directions, but still kind of end up at this cohesive, catchy hard rock sound. Chris Dahlberg from MetalTrenches.com kind of explained it, saying sometimes they get really fast and heavier than you might expect them to, while other moments capture that same warm and inviting atmosphere as some of the best melodic hardcore from the late 90s and early 2000s. I think that sums it up really well. The album as a whole is great. Some of the tracks I enjoyed were The King is Naked, The Center of Everything, Lighthouse, The Ship Will Sail, Until the End, Mystery. Check them out.
Yeah, it's got a really great sound. We're about to listen to one of their tracks. What are we going to hear from them coming up?
The track that I picked for them, which I totally told you which one it was, Until the End, around the chorus of that song. I thought it really captured the melody of their music.
Let's check it out. This is the Idoru with Until the End from the album Undertow. There's the Idoru with Until the End from the album Undertow. You're right. I mean, it's got a great sound. It got a great harmony to them as well.
I thought so as well.
I think that's certainly something that anytime you have, obviously, I think everybody knows that they listen to our podcast regularly. I'm a big fan of melodic metal. So anytime there's a harmony part involved, there's a good chance I'm going to like it. This was really good, and certainly looking forward to getting a chance to hear the whole album a little bit later on. But as always, you have 2 picks, and what is your second pick for this week?
Okay, for my second pick, I probably went a little more into my wheelhouse as far as liking power metal type music. My second pick is the second full-length album from the English melodic metal band Stormborn, and the album is Zenith, their first since their 2012 debut.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of taken a while to kind of get to that album point.
They've had some singles drop kind of in that period, but yeah, it's been quite the gap between full-length releases.
But again, I think they made sure they put something really good together before they came back to a full-length release, and I think they've done an excellent job here.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's another melodic power metal band that has been around a while that I was not familiar with until reviewing the music from this week, which is always interesting. As far as these guys go, the dual guitars of Lawrence Armitage and David Viner, just amazing, along with the vocals of Chris Simmons. I think when you put all that together, it kind of gives you this modern Judas Priest type sound that I think is really cool. Has this kind of quick intro track, like a minute or so. Kind of reminds me to Into the Lungs of Hell from Megadeth, starting with in this case, starting with some thunder and then like a slow beginning and then a ridiculous solo. Next into Land of the Servant King, which has screaming guitars and kind of the first sample you get of the vocalist. There's actually a music video for the track Fear of a Monster, which is kind of them just playing it in the studio, which for modern music videos is really all you need to do. But more than sufficient for a music video, and you kind of get to see kind of visually how that song just rips. Matt Coe from Dead Rhetoric in his review cites the band's inspirations as Dio, Priest, and Maiden, and there's no doubt you can hear that there. Most of the album is speed and scorching, and then you get to the end where there's kind of a heavy ballad echo, which is really cool. As far as standout tracks, the intro, Call of the Void, going into Land of the Servant King, Fear of a Monster, Dawn Will Come Again, Serpentine, and Echo. All really cool. Certainly worth a listen.
Yeah, absolutely. I really thought this was good, and Heather mentioned that she's really enjoying the clips of the music. It's something that we have been wanting to do for a while. The only concern was with our podcast provider is licensing issues, because the podcasts go out over so many different channels that there's a concern that we could run into some issues by doing that.
There are only so many ways and adjectives you can use to describe music without just saying, go listen to it. Like the sound can do it more justice than my words ever possibly could. So I've been kind of wanting to figure out a way to go this route where we can play the clips. So I'm glad we're actually doing that now.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of playing the clip, what would you like to hear from them this week?
So I mentioned the song Serpentine. That's just a really cool sound or song, and definitely a good example of what you get with this band. So that's what we're going to hear now.
So let's check it out. Once I put the music back up, we're going to hear Serpentine featuring Dan Smith from Stormborn's album Zenith. I love the variety there. You have like the high melody part, and then you have like the bombastic low, like grunt type vocal coming in underneath that really just kind of balances the whole thing out.
It's great without, like, there's the variety without it being grating or hard to listen to. I think the variety is really cool too.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely check that out. I think it's going to be a really great album front to back, and Stormborn with Zenith is the album. We're going to get to my two picks now, and we'll see how this works out technologically with me trying to do this and run the music. We'll figure this out. This is kind of learning on the fly. That's interesting. Heather said that her husband and her both said it reminded them of the opening song to Pokemon. So
that can't be a bad thing.
Absolutely not. It's a great
classic.
That's a great song. So definitely a good thing. We love Pokemon on this Nerdcast Empire podcast. But let's talk about my two choices this week. We're going to pick a local band to start with, and we've had some bands from Ohio come up from time to time, and we're always like, if they're good, let's pick them. And they're not always good, so we can't pick them. But this one came up, and it was a chance for us to pick a band that was local. The band is Blessed Black, and the EP in this case is Seasons Volume 2. They're from Cincinnati. They've got a really great grungy, clean sound, it feels like. They're listed as heavy doom stoner metal, but I feel like there's a lot more life to them than the typical stoner metal band, which is something I really enjoyed. They released a full-length album back in 2020 called Beyond the Crimson Throne, and then Volume 1 of Seasons was released back in 2023. I thought the vocalist Joshua Murphy really shined on these. The music was great as well, but I just thought he really kind of carried the whole thing to another level, because a lot of times with these stoner metal groups that we listen to week in and week out, the music will be really good, and then you hear the vocalist and it feels like he's down in a hole somewhere where they've just intentionally either put him in the back of the mix or they recorded him across the room from the microphone. This is not the case. Joshua Murphy really comes through loud and clear, and I think it elevates the whole thing. All 3 tracks are great. It's a 3-track EP, so it's certainly on the shorter side, but I thought, they were all really, really good. The song we're going to hear a snippet of, and then if Mike has any thoughts, I'll let him jump in, is from Serpentine Sisters, the second song on that. No, I changed my mind. I wrote that in the notes, and then I changed my mind. We're going to go with Asunder, the first track off of that album. So let's listen to a little bit of Blessed Black and Asunder. Would help I unmute myself. Blessed Black with Asunder from Seasons Volume 2. Mike, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think anytime you're talking doom metal and stoner rock, there's kind of the double concern that the music's going to get a little too drony and boring, and it's going to last way longer than it needs to. You're going to end up with like 12-minute songs of kind of the same chord progression over and over again. And kind of like you mentioned, the vocalist may or may not be audible. Like sometimes it feels like you're hearing music and the vocalist is having a conversation with somebody like in the other room. But no, this band doesn't suffer from any of that. I thought the music definitely had those doom and stoner vibes without being boring, and the singer excelled at what he did. It wasn't an afterthought, and I definitely enjoyed the stuff.
And the best thing is, because they're local, maybe we'll get a chance to actually check them out if they play a live gig, and maybe even get to interview these guys at some point.
Yeah,
so
that would be really cool.
Blessed Black, Seasons Volume 2, the EP, check it out. They're again from Cincinnati, and this is a really, really good EP. Our final new album of the week is from a band from Canada, Toronto, in fact. They are Freeways with the album Dark Sky Sanctuary. If you like classic rock, this is the album. Of all the albums that were on the list this week, this is the most classic rock album. They term themselves Canadian heavy rock with a new wave of British heavy metal vibe. Definitely can hear that. Very much like classic Canadian rock of the past. One of the bands that they compare themselves to is Thin Lizzy. I totally heard Thin Lizzy in this stuff. It's just got a great classic rock. I mean, there's really no other way to describe it. It's just so good. I thought it was good front to back. I enjoyed Can't Deny Destiny, Dark Sky Sanctuary, Traveling Heart, Fortune's Favorite. But this is an 8-track album, and honestly, you can't go wrong front to back on this one. I thought it was just outstanding. We're going to listen to a little bit of the title track, Dark Sky Sanctuary, so we'll check that out now, and then we'll get Mike's thoughts on Freeways.
Sanctuary.
wanted to play a little more because I forgot the chorus was just Dark Sky Sanctuary over and over again. But there is a little bit of, clearly these guys listen to Rush at some point and were certainly influenced. But the other thing, just listening to that chorus, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this and your general thoughts. If Ghost was a classic rock band instead of whatever you would classify their music, it feels like that same vibe, that it's just really catchy classic rock, but Ghost is obviously something a little bit different.
Well, Ghost was a classic rock band. They were called Blue Oyster Cult originally. Obviously, that's not true, but that was kind of my thought. I wasn't even thinking Ghost. I was thinking Blue Oyster Cult. But you definitely hear kind of a 70s rock influence there with some new wave of British heavy metal. I totally agree with that. Seems like something that could have potentially been an arena act back in the 70s. Really, really enjoyed the guitar melody through the verses. Like, I thought that was really interesting and not, you go from stoner metal to this, where this is a little more intricate and kind of got some cool licks to it. It was really cool.
Yeah, the one thing I didn't mention, the guitar solo in Can't Deny Destiny, I thought was really outstanding. Again, these guys just got a great sound to them. I hope they tour the States. I would love to get a chance to see these guys live. Definitely check out Freeways with Dark Sky Sanctuary. That's going to bring our new music to a close for the week. If you're listening on the podcast version of this, we're going to step aside for a break. When we come back, we're going to go into the vault where, in this case, it'll just be Mike and I will take you into the vault and give you a classic album you need to check out. We'll do that on the other side of this time out here on the Nerdcast Empire. Back on the Nerdcast Empire, we are live on Twitch for the first time ever. Thank you to everybody who's checked this out, whether you're watching on Twitch, whether you watch the VOD on YouTube, which will go up sometime this evening, as long as there's no technical issues, and then there'll be a podcast version that you may be listening to, as long as it records on my computer, because I forgot to start recording it on the Rodecaster. So hopefully the recording works on the computer. Otherwise, this may be the only version of it out there. But again, I had a feeling there would be some technological issues, and some of them are just me forgetting to hit the green record button on here. But make sure to check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. We do have a store on the Nerdcast Empire website. Check that out if you'd like to. But the biggest thing, as I mention each and every week, if you share our posts, if you go onto our podcast pages and give us good reviews, honestly, that is the best thing you can do to help us out. Just having the exposure and word of mouth is going to do wonders for us, and we appreciate everybody who's done that throughout the closing in on a year of doing this, which is kind of crazy, as we're going to be heading back to Animazement here in a couple weeks, which, that event, and then, of course, we just went to Rio Grande. Last year, Rio Grande, that event, the gaming convention happened after our trip to Animazement, and that was like the last thing that happened before we started this podcast, which is kind of crazy. But so we're going to be doing more video content. We're going to try to do more stuff on Twitch as well, trying to build our following. Of course, Mike and I and Chris, all three of us have our own individual Twitch pages we're going to be using a lot as well, so make sure you check that out as well. I'll just keep saying that over and over again. Let's get to the vault. We're going to check out classic releases, and I think two really good ones this week. Unfortunately, Chris didn't get a chance to join us, so we'll let him hold on to that vault pick until he's back to get a chance to talk about it. But we will go to Mike first. Mike, for those who may be listening to the podcast for the first time because of this new format, you're going through the alphabet with your vault picks each and every week and finding something from your collection, a very vast CD collection that you can talk about each and every week. We're almost halfway through the alphabet.
We're getting there.
What are we up to this week?
We are up to the letter L, and it's so difficult to come up with something to follow King Diamond. How do you do the King justice? I don't know, but since a lot of this first run through the alphabet has been kind of centered on music that I kind of discovered early on in a lot of my fandoms and kind of shaped my music taste as an adult. This one seemed like a pretty easy choice. This is the 9th studio album by the Japanese rock band Ciel from 2004. This is their album Smile.
This brought so many memories back to me when I saw this, because I feel like this reminds me of the Pop Japan TV era. Yeah. This was very much when I started getting into anime full-time, started getting into anime music more on a full-time basis, and these guys had been on a hiatus, somewhat, maybe not 100% of their own choosing, And then they came out with Smile and really kind of threw them back in the forefront of J-pop and J-rock. But talk about that album. It's really so good.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The album was after a few years of inactivity, which is odd because Spirit Dreams Inside actually came out in 2001 for the movie Final Fantasy Spirits Within, but then also ended up on this 2004 release. This album was kind of one of the first ones that I thought really had a big impact over here, where you thought maybe Japanese rock and pop music was actually going to break through and actually get a certain amount of promotion over here, which for whatever reason it didn't seem to last. But I feel like around the same time you had this album, you had Seventh Heaven from TM Revolution that were available in stores. Like, I'm pretty sure I bought both of these at Suncoast. So you thought, hey, maybe we're getting somewhere with this music becoming popular and, to the Western audience. And turns out it really didn't to any noticeable degree, and K-pop kind of became a thing. Obviously, this album was kind of a big deal because it featured Ready, Steady, Go, which was the second, or as Cartoon Network would suggest, also the first opening theme for the original Full Metal Alchemist anime. It's one of those songs that when I go back and re-listen to it now, I remember how cool it is, but during that period of time, it felt so overplayed as being so heavily promoted with Full Metal Alchemist that I kind of forgot how much I enjoyed it. The band themselves obviously are huge. Have songs featured in anime like DNA Squared, Full Metal Alchemist, Great Teacher Onizuka, Gundam 00, Moribito, Kenshin. As far as this album goes, Ready Steady Go's great, obviously. Feeling Fine, Coming Closer, Hitomi no Junin, Living in Your Eyes, Spirit Dreams Inside, all good stuff. And if you're looking for kind of an entry point into Japanese rock music, you could do certainly a lot worse than this album.
Yeah, and you talked about Ready Steady Go being so overplayed. The single of Ready Steady Go had 5 different versions of the song on there, including versions with each of the instrumentalists out, and then obviously a vocalist version that just had the backing vocals. So, I mean, they knew it was a big deal. It even included the Hideless version on the album, Smile, as well. But there's just some great songs. Feeling Fine is one of my favorite Larkon Ciel songs. Time Goes On, Coming Closer, Revelation, Spirit Dreams Inside. That's really good. It's just a great album. And again, it was very much at the beginning of me getting into more J-rock, J-pop. And Larkon Ciel is one of the all-time great bands. And certainly there's even more great stuff out there from them. And of course, there's the live concert they did at Otakon
2004.
That you can check out. Again, this all kind of happened around the same time, and I think it influenced a lot of people of our age. Definitely were very much into this at the time.
I feel like they in a way they didn't quite capitalize enough on how good the music from Full Metal Alchemist was just by itself. I mean, all 4 opens for that original series were tremendous.
I mean, it didn't help that they just dropped the Porno Graffiti open and didn't even bring it over here.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, when you see polls in Japan, the Melissa is favored as far as being the people's favorite open. It was the very first one, but people over here, like you said, got Ready, Steady, Go instead for both of the first and second opens. And I get it because they were really pushing this album and pushing these guys over here as well. But I had the chance to see Porno Graffiti in LA in 2013, I believe it was, and that's still one of the best concerts I've ever seen. Those guys were so good. So.
The thing is, Ready, Steady, Go for me, as far as when you look at how openings are appropriately used, it's not a first open.
No.
It goes a little too hard for that. I think Melissa was a lot better as far as, hey, this is our show, this is how it begins. It kind of has that like upbeat, things aren't horrible yet vibe to it. And Ready, Steady, Go is just kind of like, okay, now things are getting serious. I think you kind of needed that first open to even more appreciate the second.
Yeah, I 100% agree. But again, Melissa's one of my favorites of all time, and I love Porno Graffiti. Those guys are really good. But again, this is a great album. Definitely check it out if you're looking to get into J-rock, J-pop. You could do a lot worse than this one.
Maybe the concern was like, well, the American crowd will be like, who the hell's Melissa?
Yeah, maybe.
She's not even
the show. Or maybe Porno Graffiti was an issue with their name, even though it was just based on the Extreme song. It wasn't anything X-rated or anything like that. It
You
just
could do worse than basing things on Extreme songs.
absolutely. I think they should have just released a whole album of songs based on Extreme songs. But definitely check that out, L'Arc en Ciel from 2004 and Smile. So I am continuing through the years for my vault picks. We started a few weeks ago in 1969 with the Chicago Transit Authority, the first album of Chicago, and we have continued on, and we are all the way up to 1977. We are closing in on what would be considered my era. Actually, these are still pre-Matt choices, but a lot of great choices in 77. As I mentioned a couple weeks ago, once we got to 1975, really felt like the number of great albums coming out each and every year from that point on is just, there's so many. And there were really great choices. I've talked about a couple of them already. So I'm going with Styx in this case with The Grand Illusion. It was released on July 7th, 1977. Intentionally choosing the number 7777 for luck, which that sounds like something a band would do, but it was a smash hit. Sold 3 million copies in the U.S. alone. Some estimates have the album at over 6 million copies sold. I think everybody is familiar, probably to some degree or another, with Come Sail Away. I think that's probably the most famous song. It became famous again when it showed up on South Park. I think that kind of gave it a resurgence. But as we've talked about the last couple of weeks with big albums, like Come Sail Away is a great song, but man, there's so many great songs on this album. The Grand Illusion starts it off. I love The Grand Illusion. I think it's so good. It's one of Dennis DeYoung's best songs because it's pompous and over the top, but in a good way. I feel like he hadn't gone too far over the edge by that point. Then you come back with Fooling Yourself, The Angry Young Man, just a great rock song. And of course, no surprise, Tommy Shaw wrote that and sang it. Superstars, it's an all right song. Then you have Come Sail Away. Then you flip the side, too. You start out with Miss America. And the J.Y. Young songs are sometimes hit and miss, but I thought this was a really good one. I think definitely worth checking out. And then Man in the Wilderness, another Tommy Shaw song, but not really a rock song, kind of more of a folk song from him. But it's one of my all-time favorite Styx songs, just very somber. Kind of, we talked about The Last Resort by the Eagles. It feels very much kind of that same vein. So I really like that. And they have Castle Walls from Dennis DeYoung, and then the grand finale to finish it all off. These guys are so good. They're another just ridiculously talented band. Obviously, Dennis DeYoung ended up leaving the band or getting booted out of the band, whatever the situation was. And they've just continued to roll on really without him. But I think Tommy Shaw is probably still underrated as far as being one of the greatest American rock singers, classic rock singers of all time. And songwriters. They're an amazing band. I feel like they got memed there for a while, mainly because of Come Sail Away, I think, becoming popular with the South Park crowd. But definitely check out The Grand Illusion. Check out a lot of their stuff. The next album that's coming up from them, which I won't choose it because it's just next year, and we'll probably pick somebody else, is Pieces of Eight, which is another really great one. It includes Blue Collar Man and Renegade, Queen of Spades, the Pieces of Eight itself, Sing for the Day. That's when you start kind of seeing the divergence of the band, where you see Young and Shaw's vision of what they want the band to be, and Dennis DeYoung's vision of what they want the band to be. And, of course, that's eventually going to culminate in 1983 with Kilroy Was Here, which is obviously the themed album, which involved Mr. Roboto. And that's really where things kind of blew up at that point. But any thoughts, Mike, on that album from Styx or Styx in general?
Yeah, I mean, any Styx album is going to be quality at the very least. And to some degree, I think it's probably partially because you had half the band that wanted to be rock stars, and you had Dennis DeYoung who wanted to be the super theatric, like over the top movie soundtrack composer, essentially. Like, he was the opera in the rock opera, and because of that, you ended up with some really cool music along the way until clearly it just wasn't going to work anymore. But that being said, I mean, no taking away from his talent either. He and Shaw both are just amazing, and part of why Styx is kind of remembered the way they are.
Yeah, no question about it. Definitely worth checking out any of their Styx stuff, and they still tour. So definitely check them out if you get a chance. Or probably winding things down the next few years, so you're not going to get a whole lot of more chances to see them, but that is Styx with the Grand Illusion. Mike, any last thoughts in general about this live Twitch show that we did tonight as the Music Mondays has moved to a live format?
I think my only regret up to this point is that we didn't proactively set up a soundboard with various ridiculous sounds. Numerous times during the show, I thought, man, I need the Jim Ross "We're Live, Pal" soundbite to just play over and over again. I think there's a lot of potential and a lot of growth from here that we can really take advantage of. And I see everyone agrees, which I would expect them to.
We also have this one.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's going to tune out. We start using these. But I do have a few of them programmed onto this board, but we can probably add some more before that. But, that's the one right there. That's definitely the one to check out. But big thanks to everybody joining us tonight. Thanks to Heather. Thanks to Chris for joining us in the chat. And for anybody who checks this out after the fact, thanks, and let us know what you think. If you prefer the live version, I think getting the music clips in there is a big step forward, which I think that'll be a big boost. It's not going to be quite as polished because we're not going to be able to edit it before it goes live. It's just going to go out to the world. But I think it's something we're going to continue to try to do more of, and we'll probably eventually add video, but this kind of all came together as an idea about 2 or 3 o'clock this afternoon, so it became
one step at a time.
It was like, okay, let's see if we can figure this out by 7 o'clock when this is supposed to go live. But that is going to wrap things up for this edition of the Nerdcast Empire as we slowly bring in the music as always. Big thanks to Mike for all the work he does to put this together each and every week. It is a lot of work to put all this music together. So big thanks to Mike. Big thanks to Chris for all his work as well, whether it's on the podcast, promoting the podcast, whatever it may be. Big thanks to everybody who checks us out, shares our posts. We really couldn't do it without you, and there's a lot of really cool things we want to do over the days and weeks to come, and hopefully this is the next step in that progression. So really excited to continue on. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of our podcast. We'll be back sometime later this week. I'm not sure when or where. Maybe next week for Music Mondays, but we will be back again at some point. And again, check out our own Twitch channels. Each of us will be doing some more stuff there as well. That's going to wrap things up. For the entire crew, I am Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.